My girlfriend of 1.5 years had an affair with her tattoo artist. I never thought I would be the kind of person who would check my girlfriend's phone. I used to judge people who did it. I always believed that if you trusted someone, you trusted them completely, and if you reached the point where you needed to invade their privacy, the relationship was already broken anyway. That was my mindset for the entire year and a half I spent with my girlfriend, until one night something happened that made me question whether I had ever really known her at all. Her name was Emily, and when we first met, I genuinely believed I had found someone different. We met through mutual friends, started talking casually, and within a few weeks we were practically inseparable. She was funny, affectionate, ambitious, and the kind of person who remembered tiny details about things I had mentioned months earlier. She made me feel wanted. She made me feel like I was building something real with someone. By the time we reached our one-year anniversary, I had already started thinking about our future together. We talked about getting a place eventually, traveling together, and even joked about what our wedding would look like. I wasn't just dating her anymore. In my head, she was becoming part of my life permanently. Around 13 months into the relationship, Emily decided she wanted another tattoo. She already had 2 small tattoos, but this one was supposed to be more meaningful. She wanted something on her upper thigh, and she spent weeks looking through designs and tattoo artists online. Eventually, she found a guy named Ryan. His work was apparently incredible, and according to Emily, he was one of the most talented tattoo artists in the city. She showed me his Instagram and asked what I thought. I remember looking through his page and seeing pictures of tattoos, drawings, and pictures of Ryan himself. He was one of those guys who clearly knew he was attractive. I made a joke about it, and Emily laughed and told me I had nothing to worry about. She said he was just her tattoo artist. I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? People have tattoo artists they like. She booked an appointment, went to get the tattoo, came home several hours later and showed me the finished piece. It looked great. She was excited about it, and I was happy for her. The first thing that changed was how often Ryan started coming up in conversations. At first, it was completely normal. She would say things like, "Ryan suggested we change this part of the design," or "Ryan posted some new work today." I barely paid attention. But eventually his name started appearing in conversations that had absolutely nothing to do with tattoos. We'd be eating dinner and she'd casually mention something funny he had said. We'd be watching television and she'd tell me about a conversation they'd had. I remember one night joking, "You talk about this guy more than you talk about your own brother." She laughed and told me I was being dramatic. Then she kissed me and said, "You're jealous of a tattoo artist now?" I laughed too, but something about the joke stayed in the back of my mind. Then she started getting protective of her phone. It wasn't an obvious change at first. She didn't suddenly put a password on it or start hiding the screen every time I walked into the room. It was subtler than that. Her phone used to sit on the couch, the kitchen counter, or the bed without her caring. Suddenly, whenever a notification came through, she'd pick it up immediately. Sometimes she'd smile at the screen and type something quickly before putting the phone down. I asked what was funny. She'd simply say nothing. I didn't think much of it because people are allowed to have private conversations. But there was one thing that bothered me. Whenever Ryan's name appeared, she seemed to become a completely different person. She would tilt the phone away from me almost instinctively. The first time I noticed it, I told myself I was imagining things. The second time, I told myself it was probably nothing. By the 5th or 6th time, I knew I was lying to myself. The real shift happened when she started going back to the tattoo shop for what seemed like unnecessary reasons. She told me she needed a touch-up, then another appointment because she wanted to discuss a future design. One afternoon, she told me she was meeting Ryan to talk about another tattoo. I asked how long it would take, and she said maybe an hour. 3 hours later, she still wasn't home. I called her once and she didn't answer. About 20 minutes later, she texted me saying she had been talking and lost track of time. I didn't accuse her of anything, but I remember staring at that message for a long time. Talking. That was the word she used. Not getting tattooed, not planning a tattoo, just talking. A few weeks later, she started changing her appearance before going to the shop. This was the part that really messed with my head. If she was going somewhere with me, she would sometimes wear sweatpants and an oversized hoodie without thinking twice. But suddenly, whenever she had an appointment with Ryan, she'd spend extra time doing her hair. She'd change outfits 2 or 3 times. She'd put on perfume. One evening I jokingly asked, "Are you getting a tattoo or going on a date?" She immediately got defensive. She said I was being insecure and that she wanted to look good because the tattoo shop was a professional environment and she didn't want to look messy. I apologized because I didn't want to turn into the controlling boyfriend who questioned everything she did. Looking back, that apology makes me angry. Not because I apologized, but because I was apologizing for noticing something that was actually happening. The first real piece of evidence came completely by accident. Emily had fallen asleep on the couch while we were watching a movie and her phone was charging beside her. I wasn't trying to snoop. I wasn't even thinking about Ryan. Then her phone lit up. A message appeared from someone saved under a name I didn't recognize. The message preview said, "I wish tonight didn't have to end." I stared at the screen for a few seconds. I knew I shouldn't touch the phone. I knew that. But before I could stop myself, another notification came through from the same person. This time it said, "Delete our conversation when you wake up." My stomach dropped. I woke Emily up and asked who the person was. She looked at the phone, then looked at me and immediately said it was nothing. That answer was almost worse than anything else she could have said. I asked her to explain. She said it was a friend from the tattoo shop. I asked why a friend would tell her to delete their conversation. She said he was joking. I asked why he would say he wished the night didn't have to end. She said I was taking it out of context. Then she accused me of invading her privacy. That completely changed the conversation. Suddenly I was the problem. I told her I hadn't searched through her phone. The messages appeared on the lock screen. She said I was being paranoid and that if I trusted her I wouldn't be interrogating her. I wanted to believe her so badly that I almost did. That night I apologized again. I told her I was sorry for letting my insecurity get in the way. She hugged me and told me she loved me. She said there was nothing going on and that I was the only person she wanted. I remember lying next to her that night while she slept, staring at the ceiling and wondering why something felt so wrong. I didn't sleep much. The next morning everything looked normal. She made coffee. We joked. She kissed me before leaving for work. If you had seen us that morning you would have thought everything was perfect. But inside my head something had changed permanently. About a week later I noticed that Emily had started receiving calls from Ryan late at night. Not texts, calls. Sometimes they lasted 20 or 30 minutes. One night she walked into another room to answer him. I could hear her laughing through the door. That laugh bothered me more than anything. It wasn't her polite laugh. It wasn't the laugh she gave someone she barely knew. It was the laugh she used when she was genuinely excited. When she came back, I asked what he wanted. She said he was helping her with a tattoo idea. I asked why that required a 30-minute phone call at almost midnight. She said I was making everything suspicious. I told her I wasn't trying to control her. I just wanted honesty. She said I needed to trust her, so I tried. I really tried. For the next few weeks I forced myself to stop asking questions. I told myself that maybe I had become insecure. Maybe Ryan was just a friend. Maybe nothing was happening. I even convinced myself that the strange messages were innocent. But then Emily started becoming emotionally distant. She stopped initiating affection. She would come home and immediately go on her phone. She stopped telling me about her day. When I asked if something was wrong, she'd say she was tired. When I asked if she was happy in the relationship, she'd say, of course. But the way she said it sounded like she was answering a question on an exam rather than telling the truth. Then came the night that finally broke me. Emily told me she was going to dinner with one of her friends. I didn't question it. I stayed home and played video games for a while. Around midnight, I received a message from her saying she was staying at her friend's place because it was late and she didn't want to drive home. I replied that it was fine and told her to be safe. About 20 minutes later, I noticed that her location was still shared with me. She was not at her friend's house. She was at the tattoo shop. I stared at the location for almost a minute, convinced there had to be some explanation. Maybe the location was wrong. Maybe she had stopped somewhere before going to her friend's place. I waited. 10 minutes passed, 20, 30. She was still there. I didn't call her. I didn't drive there. I didn't confront her that night. I just sat there staring at my phone, feeling something inside me collapse. The next morning, she came home around 8. She walked through the door and acted completely normal. She kissed my cheek and asked if I had slept well. I looked at her and asked, "How was your friend's house?" She froze. It was only for a second, but I saw it. She said, "Fine." I asked her what they did. She said they watched movies. I asked what movie. She couldn't remember. Then I asked, "Why were you at Ryan's tattoo shop at 2 in the morning?" Her entire face changed. She didn't answer. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just sat there waiting. Eventually she said, "I can explain." Those 4 words were enough. I asked her to explain. She started crying. At first she said nothing physical had happened. She said she and Ryan had become close, but it was emotional. She said they had talked a lot and that she had developed feelings for him. I asked her how long. She said a few months. A few months. That meant she had been sitting across from me at dinner, telling me she loved me while secretly developing a relationship with someone else. Then I asked the question I already knew the answer to. "Did you sleep with him?" She covered her face. I didn't need her to say anything. She eventually admitted that they had been intimate more than once. I felt completely numb. The strangest part was that I didn't immediately feel anger. I felt embarrassed. I kept thinking about all the moments where I had defended her. All the times my friends had joked about Ryan and I had told them they were being immature. All the times I had apologized for being suspicious. I had spent weeks convincing myself that I was insecure when my instincts had been screaming at me that something was wrong. I asked her why. She said she didn't know. She told me that Ryan made her feel exciting emotions that she hadn't felt in a while. She said she loved me but had become confused. She said she never intended for it to go this far. She said the first time they kissed, she felt guilty and wanted to stop, but then she kept seeing him. She said things just happened. That phrase made me angry. Things don't just happen, people make choices. She chose to text him, she chose to meet him, she chose to lie about where she was, she chose to delete messages. She chose to come home and kiss me while knowing exactly what she had done. I told her that I couldn't understand how someone could tell you they loved you while doing something that they knew would destroy you if you found out. She said she was sorry. She begged me not to leave. She told me that Ryan meant nothing compared to me and that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. But I couldn't accept that. Because if Ryan meant nothing, why did she risk everything for him? I packed a bag that morning. She followed me around the apartment crying, asking me to stay. She promised she'd quit the tattoo shop, block Ryan, go to therapy, do anything I wanted. She said we could rebuild. She said one mistake shouldn't erase a year and a half together. I told her it wasn't one mistake. It was hundreds of decisions. Every message was a decision. Every lie was a decision. Every secret meeting was a decision. Every time she came home and pretended everything was normal was another decision. Before I left, she asked me if I still loved her. I told her, that's the problem, I do. Then I walked out. I spent the next few days staying with a friend. I barely ate. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the relationship in my head, wondering which moments had been real and which ones had been lies. I even started questioning memories that had once made me happy. Her birthday, our anniversary, the weekend trip we took. The nights we stayed up talking until sunrise. Were those moments genuine, or had I been the only person living inside the relationship? A week later, Emily sent me one final message. She said she understood why I left and that she didn't expect me to forgive her immediately. She said she had made a terrible mistake and that she would regret it for the rest of her life. Then she said something that I don't think I'll ever forget. She said, I thought you would always be there. That sentence changed something in me, because she wasn't apologizing because she had betrayed me. She was shocked that her betrayal had consequences. I never went back. I eventually found out that Ryan and Emily didn't even end up together. Apparently, once everything came out, their relationship fell apart almost immediately. She had destroyed our relationship for someone who wasn't even willing to build a future with her. Ryan stopped responding to her, and she eventually left the tattoo shop. As for me, I'm still trying to understand what happened. I'm not going to pretend I'm completely over it. Sometimes I still think about her. Sometimes I wonder whether I should have noticed earlier. Sometimes I wonder whether I could have done something differently. But I've learned something important from this. Trust doesn't mean ignoring your instincts, and love doesn't mean accepting betrayal just because you still have feelings for someone. I used to think relationships ended when people stopped loving each other. Now I think sometimes relationships end when one person stops respecting what the other person gave them. I gave Emily a year and a half of my life. I gave her trust, loyalty, and a future I genuinely believed we were going to build together. She gave part of that future to someone else behind my back. And maybe the hardest thing about betrayal isn't losing the person. It's realizing that the person you thought you knew was never the person you thought they were. I don't hate her anymore. I don't even want revenge. I just hope that someday she understands that the most painful part wasn't the tattoo artist. It wasn't even the cheating. It was the lying, because I would have rather heard the truth months earlier than spend another day believing everything was okay. And if there's one thing I would tell anyone listening to this, it's this: never let someone convince you that you're crazy simply because you're asking reasonable questions. Trust is important, but so is paying attention when someone's actions stop matching their words. Sometimes your instincts aren't trying to ruin your relationship. Sometimes they're trying to protect you. And honestly, I'm glad I finally listened. So that's the story of how I discovered that my girlfriend of 1.5 years was having an affair with her tattoo artist, and how I eventually walked away from the person I thought I was going to spend my future with. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment for more crazy confessions I get from people.